Alright gang, this week's episode picks up right where we left off last week. If you didn't watch last week's video, here's a quick recap.
Man, this car sure isn't running very good. I wonder if it's the ignition coil.
No, it seems like the ignition coil is fine. Maybe I'll try changing the spark plugs. You gotta be real careful changing spark plugs on an engine like this with these big headers. They're kind of hard to work around, and you wouldn't want to make a rookie mistake like cross-threading a spark plug. Oh no! I think I just cross-threaded that spark plug. Now my car's not going to be ready for race wars. Ah! I'm sorry you guys had to watch that. So that's the gist of it. I had cross-threaded one of the spark plugs in the head and decided to take the head off to repair it. I've seen people do this before with the head still on the engine, but I was too afraid of metal shavings and chips and stuff like that getting down into the combustion chamber. And I really figured that I had the time, I had the place, I had the equipment. It would be best to go ahead and just take the head off and repair it to be on the safe side. And that way I could do some more checking out how these spark plugs fit in the head and just to make sure that I was doing a good job. So this first night was just me taking the engine apart to get the head off of it. This is about a 3-hour job, start to finish. So at this point I've got the head off the engine and I started doing the actual thread repair job. I bought this Helicoil brand spark plug thread repair specific kit. It comes with a special tap that pilots into the existing threads and then cuts out a new tap drill diameter for the thread insert, and then at the back side actually cuts the threads for the insert as well. So it's pretty easy to use as long as you get it started good in the existing threads and don't, cross thread it again. Then you just run this thing all the way down until it's deep enough, and then what I did was I got some red Loctite, some high temp red Loctite, put that on the thread insert, used the spark plug to thread the thread insert in, and waited for the Loctite to set up all the way, and then took the spark plug back out and it was good to go. I did put some anti-seize on the spark plug threads just to make sure that it would come back out and leave the thread insert in there. I also didn't quite tap it all the way through, just so that if that thread insert ever comes loose, it can only come out and it can't go all the way in and get into the combustion chamber, which could cause an issue. At this point in the video, I was just watching another YouTube video just to make sure that I was going to do all this the right way and not run into any issues. So here you can see the repaired thread and some of the leftover red Loctite around there, and what it looks like with that insert in there. So the spark plug just goes right into this, just like it would the bare head or the bare threads on the head, like when it was new. Hold up. The helicoil's still in there, and I was able to get the spark plug out. So there it is. I think it's actually going to make it easier to install the spark plugs from now on too, because these threads start like an extra thread down in that hole, so it'll just give me just a little bit more space to get that spark plug started in there. So I'm kind of I'm going to consider this to be an improvement. Now onto the painstaking process of cleaning everything up. You don't want to install a dirty head. If you got any chips left in there, make sure to get them all out of there. I always get out a brand new razor blade and scrape it backwards across the head surface just to get any kind of gasket material and stuff like that off. With an aluminum head, if you scrape it forwards on there, you can run the chance of kind of gouging into it. All right, this head is cleaned up and ready for installation, minus this piece of paper towel down in there. Alright, now this head is cleaned up, ready for installation. Helicoil's been sitting overnight, should be cured nice and goodly. I do want to check on some of these threads while I have it out. I want to put a spark plug in and kind of look at the difference in where the tip lands between the old spark plugs and the new spark plugs, and take some pictures of that just so I have that for future reference. So, looking at these two spark plugs, this is the old one, this is the shiny new one that I'm going with. There, where you can kind of see that the ground strap kind of sticks out and comes over, and your porcelain in there is actually, it's just a little bit proud of the cylinder wall, or the little bit proud into the cylinder. Whereas if you look at this guy, it looks better on the camera than what it really is, but this guy is like recessed down in there just because this ground strap is so much shorter and the tip is so much less projected. My intuition tells me that this spark plug will make more power than this spark plug, but maybe this is the safer one. Maybe this one will make it not act a fool. Or maybe if I just gap this one the right way, that would make it work. I don't know. But we're going to try these out because I got like 20 of those right now and one spare of those. So there you go. This one, where the tips, the ground strap actually sticks into the cylinder wall, or into the cylinder chamber, it's called BKR6E. This one where it's kind of recessed in there is a R5671A-8. Alright, so we're repeating the process on the deck surface. So getting it all cleaned up. I used a razor blade on a iron deck. You can kind of scrape it forwards and not risk gouging into it if you're careful. But cleaning up the deck surface, wiping out all the cylinders, make sure any of that coolant that leaked into there gets wiped out, and installing the gasket. It's probably best to install the gasket without having all the studs in there, but I really didn't want to pull the studs out, so I just kind of worked it on there real easily. Now time to put the head back on. I am fortunate that I have a big enough engine bay that I can actually put the head on the engine with it still in the car like this. You guys with tight engine bays don't know nothing about putting big block heads on in the car. Alright, head is back on. I'm not gonna start torquing it tonight. I don't have that kind of time. I am gonna throw the intake manifold on, just sit it on there just to kind of cover up all the oil area to kind of help keep it clean for the night. And then that's gonna be it for tonight. There. We're calling it for tonight. Alright, time to get the head bolted on. So each one of these studs has a special washer that goes on, a hardened washer, and then a special fine thread nut that goes on it too. You want to make sure you oil all the threads. ARP makes a special thread lubricating compound that they want you to use. I use it if I have it. If I don't have it, I just use a light engine oil. But get them all on there, get them all snug, and then go through a torque sequence on heads. The torque sequence, you can look it up, but it's basically like you start in the middle and work your way towards the edges, back and forth. These heads are torque max at 75 foot-pounds. I do 3 stages, so I do 25 foot-pounds, then 50 on each bolt, and then 75 to finish it off. And then I had to take off some of the rocker stands to get to some of the head stud nuts. So this is just me putting those back on with some blue Loctite and torquing those to spec as well. And then all the push rods go back in the push rod holes. On a big block, the intake push rods are different from the exhaust push rods, so just make sure you don't mix them up or your rockers will be all wonky. And then I drop all the rockers on and then get ready to put the rocker nut adjusters on after that. This is just me doing a little bit of wiring here. When I taken the starter off, the starter kind of dropped and it swung by the main starter electrical connection and ripped the terminal off of the starter wire. So had to put a new terminal on. I don't think whenever I put this on originally, when I made the starter wire, I had all the good crimping and heat shrink tools that I have now. So I was able to do a lot better job this time than I did originally. All right, so quick recap of where we're at on this job so far. Head has been removed and helicoiled and reinstalled. It's torqued down. Rocker studs or torqued down push rods are installed. Rocker arms are on but not lashed, so we still got to lash the rockers. Intake manifold is just sitting on there to cover it up so that oil doesn't, or so that stuff doesn't fall in and get in the oil. Balancer needs torqued. Accessories need put back on, header needs put back on, starter needs put back on. We did fix the starter wire that came apart whenever I dropped the starter on this thing last time. But the next thing that I want to get done, the next thing that I was going to do was to lash the valves, but I really don't want to be barring this thing around off the balancer bolt to lash all these valves. I would rather do it with the starter, so I was going to put the starter in, but if I put the starter in now, then I cannot install this header around the starter. So I have to put the header partially in first, then put the starter on, and then I can use a starter to jog this thing around to lash those valves. So that's my goal for the night is header, starter, lash rockers. I feel like that's a realistic goal. Of course, if we get farther than that, that's great. But it's already like 9:40 and it's a Thursday night, so I got to work tomorrow. So, yep, that's the plan for tonight. Get those three things done, and then we'll probably call it for a night. But, yep, that's it. Let's get started. As I lifted up, all the coolant started, I guess, flowing to the side of the radiator and dumped a whole bunch of antifreeze right where I was about to lay. So, gotta clean that up now. I was just thinking while I got this all kind of out in the open here, I got this fuel line that runs here right under my headers, and it's always kind of, I don't know, it's always kind of worried me a little bit having that big fuel line that close to the headers. But I've got this DEI heat shroud that I'm going to try and throw over it. And see if that helps. If nothing else, it'll make me feel better. But this guy is just Velcro, so you should be able to just wrap it around the fuel line and then Velcro it on the back side. So, see how that goes. I'm going to have to cut the zip tie over there to be able to slide it down any further. I had my cutter. Man, if you just leave tools around, you're eventually going to be in a spot where it's right where you need it. All right, I feel better about that already, honestly. Yeah, that's pretty happening. Pretty happening job I just did right there. I gotta admit. I do have DEI header wrap on that header too, right in the same area. So between those two things, that should be pretty good there. Here's a pro tip. If you've got headers that hang low in your car and maybe drag the ground from time to time. Don't raise your car up. Just weld a skid plate to the bottom of your header so you got something for the ground to grind against. All right. I'm not gonna actually bolt the header in right now. Maybe I just put one bolt on it so it doesn't slide back down. I'm not gonna bolt it all the way in yet, just because I just had to put this header in here, kind of. I can't get it around the starter. The starter's in, and I want to put the starter in, so I'll just get a couple threads in this front bolt here so it doesn't fall back out. And that'll be enough for now. A tip on these starters too is these Chevy starters, if you buy an aftermarket starter, they almost always have both bolt patterns on them. And this is so you can use them with a 153 or a 168 tooth flex plate. And when you bolt this dude on from underneath like this, you're going to use the two bolt holes. You're going to use this hole and this hole if you've got a, what am I doing here? Hold on, I think I'm losing my mind here. Yeah. So this bolts into the engine like this. If you're using a 153 tooth, you're going to use this hole and this hole, and it's going to move the starter in. If you're using a 168 tooth, you're going to use this hole and this hole, which is going to push the starter out. Now, since so I've got a 168, so I'm going to be using these two holes. What I did on my old starter was to get just a little bit extra header clearance. I came in and just ground off this second hole here, and just to get me a little bit extra clearance and get rid of this sharp edge. That sharp edge really hurts when it falls down on you when you drop one of these starters. But that's just something you can do just to give yourself a little bit extra header clearance if you need it. I'm probably not going to mess with it on this one yet. This one, for whatever reason, seems to be less obstructive than my old one. So, starter, going back in. So something I've been meaning to do for a long time is to make a starter bump button for under the hood. So I don't have to keep going back and forth inside the car to bump the engine around. And I kept not doing this because I couldn't figure out where to mount it under the hood where I could get to it. And then I just decided to get some heavy duty alligator clamps to where I can just carry the button around with me, and I'll put some extra cordage on it so that I can just bring the butt. I can just when I need to bump the engine around, I can clamp this onto something, or I'll probably clamp it on the alternator on one side, and then clamp it onto the starter switch on the other side, and then I can just use the button to fire it. And then it's basically, I intend to use this as a starter bump button, but it's kind of just going to turn this into a universal electrical test button, doing it this way. So it'll just be one more thing I kind of keep in the car with me. So for the button itself, I'm just using this engine start button from Amazon. And this is conveniently the exact same button that I actually have in the car that I start the car with. So the other perk of using this is that if that one ever dies inside the car and I have this one with me, then I've got a spare that's exactly the same that I can just pop in real easy. Here's another tip too. So the only ring terminals I have handy are these ones that are meant for a lot larger gauge wire than what this wire actually is. So this ring terminal is really loose on this wire. Here's the fix. You strip the wire twice as far as you need, fold it in half, and then it fits in there a lot better. So that's what I do. Give it a crimp. Don't forget your heat shrink. All right, so I didn't get video of a lot of that, but the bump button works good. Wish I had done that years ago. All the rockers on this side are adjusted and the valve cover is back on, so that part of the job is done. What's next is the intake manifold's been just sitting here. It's not actually bolted on or glued on or anything like that. So the next thing will be getting the intake manifold bolted on, header bolted on, spark plug, distributor, spark plug wires, and then I still want to finish the original job I started, which was changing the spark plugs on this side too. And then obviously carburetor and fuel lines and stuff like that. But making good progress. Maybe 1 or 2 more nights on this job here, and it'll be done. So, all right. So I only got about 20 minutes right now to work on this thing, but I'm gonna try and go ahead and get this intake manifold glued and bolted on, so that I can quit ending every video with saying this intake manifold is just sitting here. It's not bolted on. It's just sitting there. It's just sitting there. But we're gonna get that done real quick. That'll give the glue time to dry before hopefully I get some more time to work on this tomorrow. Where is? Okay, so I gotta finish cleaning up some of the silicone on this guy so we can put new silicone down. Thought I had already done that, but apparently I didn't. Precariously set this here. I was planning on taking this apart before the circuit and finishing up all the port work and stuff like that, and then I just kind of decided that I didn't have time to take the engine all the way back apart and fix stuff on it and put it back together before the circuit. So I decided not to take this engine apart due to time concerns. And well, things happened, and yeah, now we're you know what we're doing. All right, so I'm big block Chevy and a small block Chevy. I don't know about other engines, but I only know really big block Chevys and small block Chevys. These front and back, we call those the China walls. If you buy an intake manifold gasket set, it will come with usually cork or rubber gaskets to put in there. Don't put those in there. Just use some black RTV. Just build up a nice little bead of RTV there and plop that manifold on there. Don't use those gaskets. Unless you've got like a really thick clearance to build up. Like if you set your intake manifold on there dry and there's a giant gap in the front or back, then I would take one of those gaskets, coat it top and bottom with black RTV, and then put it on there. Don't just use a cork gasket though. Make sure this wall is clean and dry before you try and put RTV on it. Make sure you get into the corners real good. a bead on there, wipe it off your fingers where you touch your intake manifold, or put on a fresh pair of gloves like I'm gonna do. And then you're gonna take the intake manifold and plop it on there. You want to kind of, if you've got a single plane intake manifold, you can kind of look down the carburetor hole and look down into the ports to make sure that you're getting everything lined up as good as you can. Yeah, I like taking this little headlamp here and sticking it down in there so I can get some lightage going on. You don't want to be wiggling this thing around a whole bunch once you get it on there, but you want to put some kind of thread sealant on your intake manifold bolts because they typically go into either oil or water. These are all the ones that came out of there, and they still got like a bunch of RTV gunked up on them, so I'm just going to put them in like they are and hopefully not regret that later. I don't know if these ones really have like a dead set specified torque sequence, but just like the cylinder heads, I start in the middle and work my way out. These probably have a torque specification too, but I just get them tight. Alright, so after I tighten all these up, this RTV just kind of bulged out just a little bit right in the middle there. Perfect. Feels good to have this part done, so I know the glue's drying. And I guess the next part is distributor rising. Make sure all your wires are clear too. You don't want to actually get a wire stuck in that on the china wall. It'll make for a bad day. Well, that's as far as we're going to get this time. I was really hoping this video would end with me firing this thing up, but I had some issues this week with the old daily driver Suburban that caused me to pause on this for a day and work on that thing. But come back next week and this thing should be done, and it should fire right up, and it should just be totally perfect, just like it was before. No issues. It's gonna be fine.